Earlier this year, the Iranian military launched numerous strikes towards many Gulf countries, and this has affected their commercial aviation industries by forcing a complete, later followed by a partial shutdown on their airspaces, lasting for around a few days. This caused huge travel disruptions across the planet, especially with how prominent Gulf airlines like Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar Airways are on the global aviation market, in connecting passengers across all corners of the globe. They operate in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Doha respectively, which act as some of the most influential hub airports in the world. Looking at how the Middle East is transforming into a more politically volatile region, thus accompanied with an increasing risk of frequent airspace closures, new hubs will need to be found around the area. But what cities are best suited to become major hub airports, not just in or around the Middle East, but throughout the entire world as a whole? Firstly, what is a hub airport? Hub airports transport volumes of air passengers as connecting traffic. This means they come from one city and stop at the hub, not as a final destination, but to then transit onto another flight outbound. But being a major hub requires more. Firstly, there needs to be an airline which sets up a base there. Having many airlines run flights to an airport does not make it a hub, as there is no set organisation of the flight schedule which can be logistically used for transit. This must be done by one airline, as they can efficiently schedule the connecting flights into carefully timed banks for passengers with minimal inconvenience. However, other external airlines could also join in via code shares with the main carrier. Secondly, it needs to be well geographically placed between large populations with sufficient travel demand. This is by far the most important factor, as a well-placed airport can transfer massive volumes of people quickly and efficiently. Those few hours of fuel and time saved by airlines and passengers makes the difference between a mid-sized and major hub. Thirdly, it must have a sizable local demand. While not as important as the other two, it is important to rely on local demand without connections as a source of stable income, usually by either being a very attractive destination for business or year-round tourism, for example Bangkok or Mexico City, or by having a giant metropolitan population in emerging regions, for example Dhaka and Cairo, as there will be enough people there to afford holidays or be qualified enough to go on business trips. Relying solely on connecting traffic can be risky when major air disruptions or more stable competitors arise. There are also other requirements like not having any conflicts, or not having so many geographical barriers that only 13 specialised pirates in the world can operate there, or not being overly restricted with transit and tourist visas. Infrastructure capacity also plays a factor, but this video involves finding future hubs, so I'm under the assumption that the city suggested have built the required infrastructure to handle large capacities of flights. Back to where the introduction started, the Middle East. Since the 1990s, the situation there has always been militarily intense, but one country which has escaped this and exists peacefully is Oman. Their airport in Muscat is already used by Oman Air to operate as a smaller hub, overshadowed by Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. As a new geopolitical order in the region develops and escalates, Oman may be able to keep their commercial aviation industry intact, as it lies at the edge of the area where the main conflicts will likely occur. This can cement itself as a reliable transit option between Europe, Asia and Africa, although geographically it will be harder to route via Europe, so it will be less attractive towards Europe-Asia travel, unlike the next region I will discuss. Up north in the Caucasus, all three countries could act as a gateway between Europe and Asia, which could cut travel times when compared to the Middle East. This region will be much more stable than the Middle East, despite looming threats such as a possible Russian intervention in Georgia and the Black Sea. Baku already operates like this as a minor hub, so Azerbaijan Airlines capitalizes on this to increase their foothold in the market, but this could spur competition from Yerevan to Tbilisi and possibly Batumi. Although these three countries have a population of around 17 million and none are major economic hubs, so limited local demand will restrict their potential. This could create a dynamic like the one we already see in the Gulf, where the more prominent cities in the global economic system get bigger networks and more attention, while the other cities operate smaller networks and look more modest in comparison. This is something seen worldwide, and I'll constantly refer back to this throughout the video. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about Kuwait City, Manama and Amman, as Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan are located right in the middle of the tension zone, so they will be more prone to attacks from nearby conflicts, and Jordan has already closed its airspace a couple of times in recent years. I'm not suggesting there will be long wars lasting half a year happening regularly, but rather small proxy wars and occasional week-long airstrikes occurring between major players in the region, so cities like Amman, Manama and Kuwait won't face long-term shutdowns, but minor inconveniences in airspaces will be common enough where customers will prefer to fly via more stable cities like Muscat and Baku. In Africa, only Egypt, Djibouti and Ethiopia are stable enough and well geographically placed to operate as hubs which could compete with the Europe-Asia transit market. But Egypt and Ethiopia are major players in the new Middle East geopolitical order, so they will be affected by some airstrikes which could damage Cairo's and Addis Ababa's hub capabilities. And Djibouti city is sandwiched right in this mess, so they will face the same experience as countries like Kuwait. However, transit from Africa to either Asia or Europe is entirely possible, and this is how Egypt Air and Ethiopian Airlines operate their networks. You've probably noticed that I haven't explained the new emerging Middle East geopolitical order, which is omitting key context, but this is a video about commercial planes, not international relations, and explaining it deserves its whole different video in itself. People interested in public transport also seem to be interested in international relations, not sure why, so if you want to see it then tell me in the comments section below. Down south is the rest of Africa, and there are various future hub airports. East African cities like Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, and to a smaller extent Mahe can fit as hubs, attracting the Asian and maybe some of the Oceanian customer base, but this will most likely be dominated by Nairobi. Cities in northern Africa like Casablanca, Algiers, and Tunis work as hubs between Europe and West Africa, but Algiers would not be as big due to Algeria's more restrictive visa policy. For demand between North America and Africa, cities like Dakar, Abidjan, Accra and Lagos are really the only cities viable enough to put enough passengers to become hubs. Maybe Praia and Cotonou can become minor hubs. The biggest place that will attract demand from Latin America, and Oceania for that matter, is South Africa. And beyond Cape Town and Johannesburg, I don't really see much other scope for potential. Maybe smaller hubs from Brazil via Luanda or Australia via Mauritius later connect to the rest of Africa, but this is really a place where Johannesburg has the only true foothold in the market. I find this region of the world especially interesting as the continent is very poorly connected together. It's easier to travel outside of the continent than within it, and countries don't grant too much visa-free travel around the continent, although that is changing. This means an emerging airline can set up a hub somewhere well geographically positioned between African markets, and it will attract flyers without any competition from other airlines. Previously stated, Luanda and Lagos could fit this, but the role model city is Kigali. Rwanda has seen the success of Dubai, Doha and Singapore using their airlines to form massive hub networks which have propelled them as top tier cities, and Rwanda is trying to replicate that success with Kigali. They seem to be focusing mainly within Africa, which looks like the better option as there is less competition operating within Africa, so they can cement themselves as a major African hub before expanding worldwide. Uganda is following something similar in Entebbe, but there aren't any ambitions of them becoming a major hub. The two best candidates for this are Douala and Lusaka, as they are by far the most economically relevant and politically stable cities in the region. But Douala and Brazzaville both pose as alternate options if they can build quality rail links to nearby population centres to attract local demand. Most of the cities I mentioned do actually have airlines which use the hub and spoke model in their main airports. The Asia Pacific region will be the place to expect most new hub airports in the future, because this region of the world is where an enormous population of mainly middle class people are developing, and that number will only grow. Combine this with the economic centre of the world shifting more and more eastwards, this creates a new untapped market waiting to be served. Central Asia has the same geographical advantage as the Caucasus, as Air Astana and Uzbekistan airlines already operate on this model from Astana, Almaty and Tashkent. India is the most populated country at 1.4 billion people, so really the domestic market is so strong where they don't need to bother with transiting people between two different regions. Doing so elevates its position on the world stage. Air India already does this for Mumbai and Delhi, but with the country trying to help start up new airlines and many other megacities in the region remaining unserved, we could see more pop up. Ahmedabad could be a smaller version of Mumbai, and Bengaluru and Chennai can be major South Indian hubs, especially from the African, Oceanian and East Asian markets. But they would have to compete with Sri Lankan airlines, which operate the same model from Colombo. Sri Lanka does not have the same local demand that India has, so they could lose out, and it's safe to assume that as people tend to prefer travelling on airlines which come from their own country, Hyderabad would act as a combination of all the other three cities due to its central location within India. East India is the biggest focal point here, as it's the prime gateway for Eastern and Southeast Asia, the other biggest emerging markets and economic hubs, and also because there isn't any airline which operates a hub-and-spoke model there. Dhaka and Kolkata are the two biggest megacities in the region, and both of them can play as major hub airports to satisfy this increasing demand. Kolkata has a massive domestic market at transit eastbound, but Dhaka is economically bigger, so it can generate extra local and business demand. China is also a country with a huge domestic market, but due to the increasing prevalence of high-speed rail across the country, most of the feeder passengers will arrive via train and then hop on a plane outwards. This still means the city acts as a hub, but for a combination of rail and plane transport. China's most prominent cities are positioned in a vertical line, so except for Guangzhou and Shenzhen, connecting to Southeast Asia and Oceania, China's megacities will have to rely on the domestic to international markets for hub status. This is alright due to the rising cities in inland China, such as Chongqing, Chengdu, Wuhan, and Xi'an, and Urumqi could be a small hub connecting to Central Asia. Tokyo, Seoul, Taipei, Manila, and Hong Kong are the best for connecting North America to Asia, especially Tokyo with Japan's population and Shinkansen network. And then Bangkok, Kuala Lumpur, and Singapore connect passengers from South and West Asia, Africa, and importantly, Europe to East Asia and Oceania. Europe, especially as airlines from those countries except Singapore can travel via Russian airspaces, cutting down travel times, while ones from countries like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan are barred from doing so. Jakarta may be too far south to be as big as the other three in Southeast Asia, but they also have a huge domestic market to fill the gap. Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi could become a mix of both, connect traffic from North America and South and West Asia to East and Southeast Asia. Again, most of these airlines in these cities do follow this hub-and-spoke method. Oceania does not have too many major hub options, and that's because it's tucked away in the corner of the world. Only a few global cities exist here, and the entire continent has a population of 47 million. Perth can attract traffic from Europe, Africa, and the Middle East to Oceania, while Sydney attracts it from Asia, both connecting to the rest of the continent. Auckland can transit passengers between the Americas and Australia, and Nadi potentially can act as a smaller version of this hub, but with a focus on connecting Pacific islands with each other. One city which is not a good hub airport choice is Melbourne. That's because despite being the second biggest city in the region, it is too geographically isolated from all the population masses. The Americas don't have too many well-known hub airports outside the USA, and the reason behind that is simple. Most of the world's population live in Afro-Eurasia, and the Americas are surrounded by vast ocean on both sides. Sao Paulo is Brazil's economic center and on the east coast, so it's positioned to be the main hub connecting South America eastbound, with Rio de Janeiro and Buenos Aires having capabilities of being smaller hubs. Along with Sao Paulo, LATAM operates hubs out of Santiago for Pacific-bound flights and Lima for flights coming from North America. This is something done by corporate airlines through Panama City and Avianca through Bogota and a minor hub in San Salvador. Just like Arajet placing their hub in Santo Domingo, however the latter is also geographically placed to act as an efficient transit hub with European flights and other potential cities like Georgetown, Montego Bay, and Port of Spain. Mexico City is used by Aeromexico as a hub from Latin America to North America and East Asia. For the USA, cities on the west coast like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Seattle are all used as hubs between North America and flights over the Pacific. Miami and Houston border the southern coast, so they are the main hubs towards Latin America, and East Coast cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington DC connect to European, African, and Middle Eastern destinations, but due to the giant travel demand for North Transatlantic travel, pretty much all of the major hubs operated by United American or Delta integrate a sizable volume of European destinations. Then there are the hub airports which transport people across America and beyond, the biggest ones being Denver, Dallas-Fort Worth, Chicago, and Atlanta. Other medium-sized hubs in Phoenix, Salt Lake City, Charlotte, Detroit, and Minneapolis. This doesn't leave many other American cities as potential hub airports, as the country already has a stable hub-and-spoke network, which doesn't seem to be breaking down anytime soon. Canada follows something similar, but on a smaller horizontal scale. Vancouver hosts the Pacific-bound flights, Montreal hosts the Atlantic-bound flights Toronto is the economic centre of the country, connecting Canada from east to west and also beyond the country, while Calgary is a smaller east-west hub. This is broadly how Air Canada operates, but there are a few major cities not included in the hub-and-spoke model. Halifax is the easternmost major Canadian city, so it could be a good transatlantic hub, and Winnipeg is in the middle of the country, so it could be a good east-west hub. North America already has quite a built-up flight network, so unless this region experiences an economic boom like Asia, not too many future hubs will emerge here in the near future. Finally, we move on to Europe, and just like North America, the aviation network is already built up, so there probably won't be a major hub emerging anytime soon. If anything, we will see a reduction of flights in European hub airports with the development of faster rail transit networks and the border-free Schengen zone, both allowing travellers to travel further by high-speed rail to bigger airports like Amsterdam and Paris to catch a flight instead of going to their sub-region's biggest airport. This is already seen in Bratislava, where people prefer to use Vienna for flights instead of Bratislava airport. Even though this will increase the number of railplane hubs, this will kill off any possibility of European hubs transiting people across different sides of the continent, unless that country has terrible rail infrastructure. So hubs like Vienna and Copenhagen will slightly decrease in the future, as they are major hubs connecting different European destinations with each other. Lisbon and Madrid are the best Latin America-bound hubs, and like Rome, also good Africa-bound hubs, with Porto and Barcelona acting as smaller versions. London, Paris and Amsterdam are the main hubs connecting North American traffic, coupled with smaller hubs in Brussels, Dublin and Keflavik. Zurich, Munich and Frankfurt can compete with transferring passengers between North America and Asia, while also taking in some Eastern European flights. The main gateway from Europe into Asia is via Istanbul, but that is out of the Schengen zone. This leaves European traffic into Asia being attracted via Athens, Warsaw and possibly Helsinki. The journeys for the latter will be longer due to Russian airspace blocking Finnish airlines from flying over. Poland is a rapidly rising economy, so Warsaw will be a very important piece in the global aviation network. Athens also stands out due to its close proximity to Asia and high tourist demand. So while not entirely set in stone, the maturity of Europe's aviation network means it will be a region of the world where it's challenging to emerge as a new hub-and-spoke airline. If I had to choose the best options for future major hub airports in the next 10 years, here are my picks. In the Middle East, I'd say Muscat and Baku are the best picks. In Africa, Kigali has the biggest hub airport potential in the region. For Asia, the best future hubs will be in Bengaluru and Jakarta, and Oceania will see Perth become the main hub as more flights from Europe will start to operate. In Latin America, I see San Salvador and Georgetown becoming the next hubs as they have rapidly growing economies, and the same logic can be applied to Warsaw in Europe. Maybe in 15 to 20 years we will see new cities like Lagos, Lusaka, Dhaka, Nadi and Santo Domingo become hubs, but they will take more time to develop as those cities try to find their grip on the global stage. That's the end of the video.